There was a storm in the distance, and Mads had to hurry to make the fire. Cancer had consumed Cole's beautiful body. Mads couldn't save him, and then permanent pain gave him eternal rest. So all Mads could do now is give his shipmate a right proper Viking funeral, and that meant the pyre. Doc was there earlier to administer the fatal dose, and then left as Mads had requested. Mads was knelt down now before Cole's lifeless body. Mads rose and lifted Cole up, his arms outstretched, a father carrying his son, his final steps. Mads had never understood the significance of the cross until that moment. The sweltering humidity and summer storms softened the red clay along the banks of Bayou La Fourche, and Mads struggled to maintain his balance both from the burden he was carrying and the slick, slippery slope leading Mads down into the swamp. Dressed simply in cargo pants and a light shirt, both of which were covered in clumpy crimson mud, Mads carried his great Pyrenees into the brackish water to a moored wooden dinghy Mads had built for Cole. Mads moved with haste in anticipation of the storm bearing down on them. The water swelled, and the undercurrent pulled Mads, and he almost lost Cole into the bayou that bleeds into the Gulf of Mexico. Upon placing Cole's three-legged body into the little wooden boat, Mads slipped his waterproof pack from his shoulder, placing it in the dinghy, and he removed 4 items from it. The first was Cole's collar with an inscription that read, "Hold fast." Nordic funerals, the tradition of Mads' ancestors, included giving gifts of grave goods for the dead to take with them. "Just in case our paths cross again, mate," Mads spoke softly to him. The second grave good Mads brought was Cole's singular stuffed toy. He loved that sheep, Mads thought to himself, managing a trace of a smile, placing the stinky, soiled toy next to him. "Who knows if you need a sheep where you're going, but it's better to have one than not," Mads said to Cole. Mads kissed his left hand hard for more than just a few seconds and placed it on Cole's head, and then took the third item from his pack, Irish whiskey. Mads broke the bottle's neck on the dinghy's bow, thereby christening the boat, but Mads gave it no name. A silent toast, a swill of the whiskey, and then Mads secured the bottle in the ship as he designed it. Mads spared no motion, as it was now time for the last thing in his sack, the flame. Uncapping the flare, Mads struck it and placed it in the throat of the broken whiskey bottle. Unmooring the dinghy, Mads set Cole a sail, hoping the impending storm wouldn't extinguish his funeral pyre first. But Mads had engineered the boat to reach maximum combustibility within minutes. Mads stood unmoving in the fetid and foul stench of the swamp, in all of its rotting detritus. It would remain there, watching until the last ember. Mads was not known for recognizing rituals or religious observances, but there is a tradition among seamen from which Mads came from a long ancestral line of, and Cole was his shipmate, and this is how Mads honored him. The boat burned and Cole's body with it, and by design, it combusted fast and completely, so much so that there would be little to no remains of him. Mads had lined the dinghy with white phosphorus, also known as the Devil's Element, and the ship was afire with a green glow against the stormy skies, a haunting beauty Mads would never forget. Mads felt no admiration for his design, only a sense of a successful mission as the dinghy sank down into the delta. Chest deep in the bayou, Mads slogged his way back to the river's bank, out of the swamp, and sat upon its edge awaiting the storm's arrival. He felt many things, but mostly Mads felt the absence of feeling. At least Cole wasn't suffering any longer from metastatic cancer, and perhaps that was the reason he shed no tears today. Mads did wish Doc was still here as his one and only friend, but he couldn't ask Doc to do that. Funeral pyres are illegal, and Doc had sternly advised him as such, and implored him not to dispose of Cole's body in this manner. Mads accepted that graciously, and he followed most nearly all of men's laws, but some he couldn't, and this was one of them. The laws of nature and reason have always been Mads' guide. Justice and equity are man-made constructs Mads had learned long ago, and there is no fairness in life. Mads knew that implicitly, principally, and yet he couldn't move from this place. Mads just couldn't let Cole go, and he didn't understand why. At some point, Mads couldn't remember how long he sat on the banks of Bayou La Fourche. It seemed like both a moment and a lifetime. Mads remembered yelling at himself, whether out loud or in his head. "Get your ass up, mate. Get up. You gotta get moving." And yet, Mads didn't move. Maybe what Mads feared most was that his next steps would be back down into the swamp where Cole was now. And even though Mads had no desire to die, he was lost in a loop and couldn't find his way out of it. And then came the Dragonfly. Mads almost swatted it away from his left arm until he saw it. The Doppler had mistaken the gathering storm for a swarm of dragonflies, and they were everywhere, feasting on the sparrow-sized mosquitoes indigenous to the Delta. Mads thought he was suspended in a dream state for a moment until he touched the dragonfly seemingly stuck to his arm. With red-veined wings that appeared translucent, Mads was witnessing nature's imperfect symmetry. It was magical, a word Mads rarely used. Mads would later identify this one as the red-mantled saddlebag, and he would educate himself entirely on dragonflies. With thousands of species worldwide, most nearly every culture shares a similar symbolism of them as transformation. Like locusts to a field, the dragonflies fed and moved on, and the moment was gone, again making Mads wonder if it was real. Mads sat all alone on the river's bank, examining himself, and he was transformed all right. He was beat down and broken-hearted. Mads was once a blue-eyed, black-haired Irishman, but the seas had turned his cedar shingles gray. Grizzled and weathered by Cole's cancer, Mads was a mess, and now covered in red clay and swamp scum. Mads was at the bottomland now, and at his most base level, Mads knew the world as he understood it was no longer. But as a seaman, his instinct in the midst of a storm was to sail right into it, and that's precisely what Mads did. Mads had killed his son today. He cursed himself for it first, then man, and then God in that order. One way or another, Mads would go meet this God that took his son away from him, and within days after Cole's passing, into the abandoned depths of his soul, Mads would take his trawler. No land he sought, no shore no more. Mads vowed to remain at sea until it took him. Mads sailed.